Dopamine, 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 serotonin, everything. Death, decay, mortality, spring vibes. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. I'm Eliza and today I'm giving you some spring book recommendations because spring has sprung. It's warm, the flowers are out. I'm in Australia, so it's actually autumn time, but today is hot, so it feels like spring. You want those spring vibes, something cozy to read, something hopeful, but also a few dark, twisted tales. Then I've got the books for you. I've got some books here in basically every genre. I'm going pretty quick fire because I've got a big stack to get through. First up, we have a book by an Australian author who I met recently, and it is Life Drawing by Emily Liazzolo. This is a contemporary literary novel which explores womanhood, love, commentary on women's bodies and how women's bodies change over time. I actually went to the promo book event for this book thinking it was a how to draw life drawing book, but I was pleasantly surprised because through the interview I discovered no, it's actually fiction. The way the author talked about it made me really want to read it, so hopefully I can do the same for you. This story follows Maisie and Charlie. Maisie is a life drawing model. She meets Charlie, who is an artist. It's about their relationship over a long span of time, and this book explores concepts like art and the gaze of the male or female gaze, desire, consent, relationships, all the stuff that is being talked about more than it used to be, and I'm all for it. So I'm looking forward to reading this one. The next book is Tom Lake by Anne Patchett. This is the story of a mother reminiscing about her young wild love with a movie star back in the day to her 3 grown-up daughters now. It's set during springtime at the family orchard. It's a hopeful story about love, but also what happens when love goes wrong or doesn't go right. Next is historical fiction novel The Guernsey Literary and Potato Peel Pie Society by 2 authors, Mary Ann Schaffer and Annie Burroughs. I read this book like 7 years ago now, and I really loved it, even though it's completely different to most of what I read. This novel is mostly set on the English island of Guernsey shortly after World War II, when the island was under German occupation. The whole story is written in letters, with our main character, who I think is Juliet. Yes, Juliet gets in contact with one of the inhabitants of Guernsey, and through their letters they start a kind of friendship, and she goes to visit him and the other inhabitants of Guernsey. We learn what life was like for them at the time under the German occupation. While it brought them together, they also had communal suffering through the hardships that they all went through. This book is big on exploring community, friendship, and romance. It's funny, sad, heartwarming, charming, and yes, I've got the movie version of the book, but I really recommend the book over the movie, even though I did watch the movie and it was fine, but it cut a lot of the details out that make this as wonderful and memorable as it is. So I do recommend it. Even if you're not usually a wartime reader like I'm not, it is a book that I would definitely reread again. Next is a book I cannot wait to read. It has 3 timelines with 3 main characters. Wayward by Amelia Hart is meant to be atmospheric, mysterious, slightly gothic as well, with its setting at an English cottage in the countryside, and explores the power of nature as well as womanhood and witchcraft, or how witchcraft is tied into womanhood. I don't usually just read the blurb, but in this case, I don't know if me talking about it will do it justice, so I'm going to tell you about the 3 little wow, I was going to say 3 Little Women. Excuse me. Kate, 2019. Kate flees London, abandoning everything for Cumbria and Wayward Cottage, inherited from her great aunt. There, a secret lurks in the bones of the house, hidden ever since the witch hunts of the 17th century. Violet, 1942. Violet is more interested in collecting insects and climbing trees than in becoming a proper young lady, until a chain of shocking events changes her life forever. And lastly, we have Alpha in 1619. Alpha is on trial for witchcraft, accused of killing a local man. Known for her uncanny connection with nature and animals, she is a threat that must be eliminated. But wayward women belong to the wild, and they cannot be tamed. Weaving together the stories of 3 women across 5 centuries, Wayward is an enthralling novel of female resilience and the transformative power of the natural world. Perfect for springtime. The next book that I've got for you is Sweet Bean Paste by Jurian Sukagawa. This is some Japanese fiction that's also set in Japan about a down-on-his-luck aspiring writer who's made some mistakes in his life, some choices, if you will, and currently works in a confectionery store selling dorayaki, which is like a little pancake filled with sweet red bean paste. In the story, he forms an unlikely friendship with an older woman, and I think they uncover each other's dark secrets or perhaps share them with each other. Another book with themes of community, and it's more of a slice of life novel. When I was in Japan, I was obsessed with these, or at least the 7-Eleven version of these. They were so good. And yeah, maybe I should read a whole book based on this sweet bean paste. Next up, I've got a few Greek myth related books for you. Thinking of springtime, I thought of Persephone, goddess of spring, but also goddess of the underworld in Greek mythology. This first book is called In the Garden of Monsters by Crystal King. This is based at a real place you can go to in Italy. We have our main character who is this, again, another life drawing model. She has no memory of her past. She's very wishy-washy on the details, cannot remember. This book features a fictionalized version of Salvador Dali, and she becomes his beautiful muse, and he sees her like she is the real actual Persephone, goddess of spring and the underworld. He even insists that she eats pomegranate seeds to keep her there. This book explores themes of art, beauty, while also being eerie, and blurs reality and myth together. So maybe even as a reader, we're not sure what's real and what's not. Then I actually have a graphic novel for you that's based on a webcomic, Lore Olympus by Rachel Smythe. It's a really cool new take on Greek mythology and how to adapt it into what is kind of modern, because in this world there are cars, there are cities with huge industrial buildings, and we've got our main characters, Hades, god of the underworld, and Persephone, who is the goddess of spring and becomes goddess of the underworld, or queen of the underworld. This is an adapted story of how they meet and fall in love and feel a connection. There are multiple volumes now with the printed version, although you can find the whole thing online as well. I think it's really cool seeing how each of the deities is interpreted in this, with a really cool art style as well. And I absolutely love the colors. There are multiple plot lines, each exploring different deities, but they are all connected somehow. I do have some criticisms of this series and its take a little bit, but I do think a lot of people would still enjoy it. I just have not gotten past volume 2 or 3, even though I've tried a couple of times. Next is a book I love. I'm going to give you a quote and see if you can work out what it is. He was spring, golden and bright. Envious death would drink his blood and grow young again. How beautiful is that? Have you worked out what it is? The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller, of course. I love Madeline Miller. I love Circe more, but this one is good, is very, very good. I have not reread this, but I would in a heartbeat. Beautiful lyrical writing, but not too stuffy or overdone. It follows the story of Achilles' lover, Patroclus, who in the Troy movie, as much as I love it, even though it has its faults, they make Patroclus his cousin, and it's like, no, that's not the myth. In this world, Greek deities do exist, and it's just beautiful. I didn't cry. I know a lot of people cried when it got to the ending. Maybe on my reread that will happen eventually, because she's just a stellar writer. I will read anything that she publishes. Next, we're going to get into some thrillers, mysteries, and a little bit of fantasy as well. I'm going to start by recommending you a series that I love. There are 6 books in this series. I have not read the 6th one yet, though it's basically the next book on my TBR, because I love this series and I'm sad it's coming to an end because I could live in this world. If you didn't already know, based on me talking about it in other videos, it is the Shady Hollow series by Juno Black. This is Beatrix Potter meets Agatha Christie with a splash of Gilmore Girls. Very cozy, very easy to read, very comfort read. Each of the books I think is around 300 pages, maybe even a bit less. So they're accessible, quick to read and easy. And I did not mention, did I? All of the characters are actually animals that live in a woodland town together. So you've got kooky characters like Gilmore Girls getting up to little mischief. Our main character is a fox, Vera Vixen, who is a journalist. So when crimes happen, like there might be a murder, she will go and stick her nose in there and try to get to the bottom of the story. And she has a best friend who's a raven who owns a bookshop. There's this place called Joe's where they go for delicious muffins and yummy sounding seasonal delights. There's also a panda who runs a restaurant with delicious things. I think it's called the Bamboo Patch. There's little small town dramas. There's a raccoon who is a known thief, but he often gets away with it, even though he'll get locked up overnight and then they let him go. Each book is clearly in a season. I know for sure that the Twilight Falls book, which I think is the 4th one, does take place in spring. It's so cute. It's so vibey. I'm sad that there's only 6 stories. Well, there's 2 short stories too, which I did read. I liked the Halloween one more than the Christmas one, if anyone wants to know. The 6th one is set in autumn, and since it is autumn here, I am going to read it. Next is a young adult, cozy, magical, sort of romance book with strong fantasy elements, and it is Flower Heart by Catherine Bakewell. This is the story of a girl called Clara who has magical wild powers, and they've never really been dangerous until she accidentally creates some plants that are poisonous growing in her dad's chest, which she didn't want to happen. He can only be healed with a mysterious magical spell, which she needs her ex-best friend who she used to love's help with to heal her dad. But he, the ex-best friend, might not want that to happen, or there's something kind of mysterious, maybe sinister going on. It does have some dark elements from what I've heard, but is still quite cozy. It sounds like she'll get some help from her old flame, but not without a price. Then we've got a bit of a darker, more gothic romantic fantasy, which is Belladonna by Adeline Grace. This is a series, by the way. Belladonna takes place at a grand estate with lush gardens, and it's described as being both glittery and gloomy for our main character. There is a murder mystery in this because a spirit shows up saying they were murdered and they need her help to work out what happened. And this also features Death himself as a character who may or may not be hot. The next book is a thriller that I read about 5 years ago, and it was a pretty solid thriller that kept me guessing and had more science-y explorations than other thrillers I've read. So if the forensic aspect interests you, this might be a good one. It is Black-Eyed Susans by Julia Heberlin. This is the story of a girl who survived an attempted murder when she was a teenager 20 years ago. She barely survived with very little memory of the case, but they did put the murderer away in prison. She wasn't the only victim. There were previous murder victims before her. They are called the Black-Eyed Susans, which is a type of flower, based on where they were buried, where the grave site was, which was covered in this bright yellow flower. However, now, suddenly, outside her window, she discovers there is a newly planted patch of these Black-Eyed Susan plants. So she suddenly is worried that the man she put away in prison is the wrong person, and also that this serial killer is still on the loose. And I think that's a pretty good hook. This next book is Perfume, the Story of a Murderer by Patrick Suskind, translated from German. And I think it's really well linked to spring because our main character is a murderer obsessed with how women smell, much like flowers. A terrifying examination of what happens when one man's indulgence in his greatest passion, his sense of smell, leads to murder. And one of the reviewers on the back said, it's a meditation on the nature of death, desire, and decay. Because let's be reminded of our mortality when everything's growing, right? Because at some point it's all gotta die. As you can tell, dark, twisted. Need I say more? Now onto some classics. Let's start on the lighter end because I've got some light, whimsical type classics, and then I've got some darker ones like the one I just talked to you about. I feel like this author has very much spring vibes, or at least that's how her books have been marketed, with a lot of flowery imagery on the covers and things, and that is books by Jane Austen. The only Jane Austen book I've actually read is Pride and Prejudice. However, I have seen other movies like Persuasion and Emma, and I've heard that Emma and Sense and Sensibility are some of the more springy energy books of hers. I feel like everyone has kind of an idea of what Jane Austen stories or novels or movies are like, but I was trying to think to myself, how does one explain this in layman's terms if you had to? So I basically said they're Regency era stories, especially about women in particular doing their best to work with what they've got and their limitations in society through marriage and status. Also featuring romance, obviously, and commentary on family dynamics and societal pressures. Even though I'm not the biggest fan of the Emma storyline, I do love Clueless though. I think the Emma 2020 movie is really beautiful in its pastel colors, color scheme, costumes, everything. Even though that's not a book recommendation. Another classic that is famous that you will know as soon as I mention is The Secret Garden by Frances Hodgson Burnett. Mary is a little girl who is an orphan who is sent from India, I believe, from where she was with her parents, because the English loved to go live in India in this time period and colonize it. Because she's been recently orphaned, she's sent to live with her relatives in Yorkshire. There's this huge manor, but it feels very cold and unwelcoming. Think Wuthering Heights kind of vibe. She's got a cousin around the same age as her. She gets to know the maids and the people who work in the house. And her uncle, her cousin's dad, is not really around, and everyone's just kind of removed. When she's exploring, she discovers a neglected secret little garden. She starts to care for this garden and also introduces other members of the household to the garden, some in secret because they're worried the grown-ups will put an end to it. And slowly the garden comes back to life, and it's a huge metaphor for the healing power of nature. Her cousin, who is ill, starts to get better by being in the fresh air and being in nature, and it helps build their relationships and their sense of community. They encourage each other and have fun. All the things that they were missing. And this is just me talking about it based on the movie that I saw a lot as a kid, even though as a kid it really scared me in some parts because it was quite like dark and dreary. But the movie is beautiful. The music is excellent. It makes me want to cry. If you listen to the music while you're in a beautiful garden, you will have the best time. Story time, I did that listening to this soundtrack. Walking around in London, there's Holland Park, which has the beautiful Dutch gardens and Japanese gardens. And I just had the best, most magical time wandering around listening with this music playing. It was beautiful. And I would read the book. I haven't yet, but I would. But I do recommend the film as well, even if you're not going to read the book. Growing up, I also always got The Secret Garden a little mixed up in my head with Anne of Green Gables by M. Montgomery. Anne of Green Gables is about another redhead orphaned girl sent to live with her relatives, or at least some people to look after her. Anne of Green Gables follows the story of Anne, who goes to live on a farm this time. And it's all about her wild imagination and zest for life. And there's like 10 novels as well in that series. So there's a lot of content for you there. Next, I've got the Alice in Wonderland books by Lewis Carroll. Alice in Wonderland really explores childlike wonder with all the crazy stuff that happens that makes no sense, and the animal characters. If you haven't actually read it, but you really like the movie or the vibe of the movie, the visuals, I would say read it. I listened to these a couple of years ago on audiobook. There's heaps of versions, but I listened to the version read by Miriam Margolyes, who is Professor Sprout in Harry Potter. And she did a fabulous job. I think she made me enjoy it more than the book itself. But I know that Alice in Wonderland is very close to a lot of people's hearts, and it's whimsical and absurd and nonsensical and fun and springy. So I thought I would include it here because we've all got different taste. And of course, The Hobbit by Tolkien. For people who love the Lord of the Rings movies or that world and high fantasy, but maybe aren't ready to commit to the really dense Lord of the Rings trilogy, The Hobbit will give you a bit of a sneak peek into the world of Middle-earth and is suitable for most ages, I think, because it's more accessible. Like a starter pack for Lord of the Rings. Follows the adventure of a hobbit, who'd have guessed, who goes on a magical adventure meeting other mythical creatures. Now we're moving into a couple of darker classics, which are very springy nonetheless. This first one, I think a lot of people would associate more with winter or autumn time because it's grim, it's gothic, there's murder, dark themes, but there's a lot of imagery in here about flowers, because one of the things that's really explored is beauty and the price we pay for it, to maintain it or to get it. And in case you couldn't already tell, it is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This is a literary memento mori. I've got the copy that I've also annotated, and I listened to the audiobook narrated by Ben Barnes, who also was in a movie of Dorian Gray, which takes a lot of liberties, but still a good movie. Very dark. Again, allow me to read you the first line because this will set up the spring theme quite nicely. The studio was filled with the rich odour of roses, and when the light summer wind stirred amidst the trees of the garden, there came through the open door the heavy scent of the lilac, or the more delicate perfume of the pink flowering thorn. Yeah, it says summer, but I don't care. Spring vibes. Flowers. About renewal, rebirth, death, decay, mortality, spring. This next classic is literally set in spring, so allow me to read you the first line and you might guess what it is. We've got a bit of trivia in amongst this recommendation video. It was a bright, cold day in April and the clocks were striking 13. You got it? You got it yet? If you said 1984 by George Orwell, you would be right. This is literally set in spring, so it's a spring book. But I feel like this is also going to be good for the girlies who are not in a happy-go-lucky pastel spring mood yet, because there's a lot in the world to be angry about, and I feel like this book will enforce that anger in a good way to make you feel vindicated, because so much of what is currently going on in the world with fascism, I'm so angry I can't say it, totalitarianism and propaganda, all this stuff is in this book. The parallels between those themes in this book with what's currently going on in the world and the state of the world and current events are clear as a crisp spring morning. So if you want to feel angry about that, read this. And if it doesn't make you angry in that way, and you're like me, and you read this and you actually don't really like it, at least then you will be angry and well-read and educated. Yes? Yes. Just being transparent because I didn't love it while also recognizing its significance. But if you want to read it, read it. Spring is a time for appreciating the beauty around us, and what better way to do that than with some poetry and short story recommendations. Let's start with some ancient poetry by Sappho. Sappho was an ancient Greek philosopher, poet. Her poetry is quite beautiful and easy to follow, with themes of love, lust, longing, loneliness and mortality. And originally they estimate that there were around 10,000 poems by Sappho, but now only around 650 exist, and I think a lot of those are still only fragments. I listened to them last year in audiobook. Didn't love the audiobook, it was just one I found on Spotify, but I would 100% buy a copy to have to read at my own pace. Another poetry collection is one that I would recommend the audio of that can be found on Spotify and probably other places, which is Violet, I always get this name wrong, Violet Bent Backwards Over the Grass by Lana Del Rey. Now, Lana Del Rey obviously is a very talented musician and writes great lyrics. This poetry collection I think has got quite polarized reviews. However, I enjoyed it for the experience because it is dreamy, springtimey, summertime sadness maybe even might be more apt. It's narrated by her and features soundscapes, like it feels very sad girl spring, but make it 2010s Tumblr vibe almost. How do I describe it? I feel like if you're curious, go listen to it. It's only around 45 minutes. And there's also a companion printed edition that you can get, but I didn't have that. Next, I've got a short story collection for you. The Beginning of the World in the Middle of the Night by Jen Campbell. I read this like 8 years ago now, and I actually met the author at multiple London events when I lived there. So she wrote a message in the front of one. To Eliza, I hope you enjoy these twisted tales. Love, Jen. P.S. Hello again. Stories of family and magic, lost souls and superstition, spirits in jam jars, mini apocalypses, animal hearts and sideshows. Mermaids are on display at the local aquarium. A girl runs a coffin hotel on a remote island, and a couple are rewriting the history of the world in the middle of the night. This is a whimsical set of, I think, around 10 short stories. One of the stories is literally about kids turning into plants. Spring enough for you yet? Then I've got a book I'm really excited to read, and it is the Bramley Hedge series by Jill Barklam. This I picked up last year, and there are 4 main stories, one for each of the seasons, and I think it starts with the spring story. Yes, it does. Aren't they beautiful, the illustrations? I just love them. Cozy, nostalgic, even though I haven't actually read this, it feels nostalgic to me. So cute. Don't you want to live here? If slow living and cottagecore came from anywhere, it would be here. I probably will read the whole thing, but I might also go back to this each time there's a new season, and it probably feels like that season because it just, even looking at it without reading it makes me happy. Dopamine, serotonin, everything. Beasts and Beauty by Soman Chainani. I read a couple of years ago and I really enjoyed it. I think the illustrations are beautiful, and it reimagines 12 classic fairy tales in a new way, whether it's making the princesses princes or changing who the villain and the hero is. For example, a prince has a surprising awakening. A beauty fights like a beast. A path to happiness is lost, then found again. If you like fairy tales, folklore, retellings of those, that might be the one for you. Even though it's middle grade to young adult, I still really enjoyed it. Each of the stories has kind of an edge, but from memory, most of them end happily. And I think also my brain thinks fairy tales, spring vibes because of Beauty and the Beast with the rose. And I think Sleeping Beauty also features roses like thorns. Does she prick her finger, or he, on a rose instead of a spinning wheel in this one? I don't know. Go read it, find out for yourself. Then I've got a 3-part graphic novel series, which is The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. These are beautiful. The colors, the illustrations, but also the story and the themes are super comfy, cozy cottagecore vibes. In the Tea Dragon Society stories, there are tiny dragons which, when you care for them, grow little tea leaves on their backs that you can pluck off, and it doesn't hurt them at all in this fantasy land. And you can make teas that have magical powers and properties. This series is big on themes of community and friendship, as well as little bits of romance. And if I didn't already say it, found family, as well as good representation, I think, of people with physical differences. It's cottagecore, but with miniature dragons. And what more could you want than that? I want to quickly mention, if you love childlike wonder in movies like the Studio Ghibli movies, you can also find novelized versions of those stories, including Howl's Moving Castle and Kiki's Delivery Service, for similar beautiful whimsical stories with folklore magical elements. Lucky last, I've got a few non-fiction books, and no, they're not "this is how to make the most of springtime." No. Not the vibe, okay? Firstly, I've got 2 books for the crafty girlies, both by Martina Calvi, who I have met at 1 or 2 events. I have a lot of sticky notes in these. The first is the art of memory collecting, and the second one is a year of junk journaling. These can be read separately but also accompany each other quite nicely. They are both DIY craft project kind of manuals or inspiration, and give me a very 2000s how to do it yourself vibe, kind of like you'd find in magazines and books at that time especially. I am a junk journaler, so I had a lot of fun flicking through these and making note of basically everything that I want to try, including a personal time capsule, miniature travel magazines, and framed memories. A year of junk journaling goes more into 52 inspirations for different spreads you could make. Both are soothing, nostalgic, and inspiring with how-tos, tips, and tricks. The next book I've got is All About Love by Bell Hooks, which is having a bit of a revival through these last few years, where I've seen a lot of people reading it, even though I think this was published in the 90s or 2000s, and explores the concept of love in society, between partners, and platonic and community. How it is not only something that you have and receive, but something that you can actually do in practice. And it's just over 200 pages, so I feel like that's pretty accessible. Then, lucky last, we've got a book that I recently read and loved. It is a self-help book, but probably the least selfish self-help book that you will come across, and I've got a separate review just for this book too, and it is Half-Ass Human by Lena Norms. Lena Norms is kind of an activist. She's been on YouTube for a long time. She makes videos about books, the climate crisis, sewing, videos about Wicked. She has a lot of great videos on sustainability. She's someone who I trust her opinion and perspective, even though we might have slightly different views or experiences. Someone whose videos I always come away with new ideas, new ways of thinking about things, new facts. But basically this is about how you can half-ass your way to doing the things that you want to do to make life better for yourself, for others around you, and for the world in general, including the environment. What I really liked about this is that she actually gives out-of-the-box practical ways of how to do things. That doesn't mean you have to devote your whole life or all your energy to it, but it can still make positive changes and a ripple effect for you and others. Chapters on career, home, your body, and even veganism. Now, I'm not a vegan, but I do think that being vegan in a lot of ways, depending how you do it, is obviously a really great step for animals and the environment. And in here, she gives lots of concrete, practical ways that you could take a little step into veganism without full-assing it. Her point is basically it's better to half-ass something than full-ass it and then give up on it. Examples of how to be vegan include being like a breakfast vegan, just eat vegan for breakfast, or make all your main meals vegan and maybe snacks don't have to be, or the other way around. This is a very shortened version of some of what this is about, but I would really recommend it. She also does the audiobook, so if you like her videos, go read this, or if you don't know who she is, look up her videos and I'll include some in the description. But I really loved it, and I have done a lot of good things in my own life since reading this, and it's just a bit of a mindset shifter or reinforcer of things that you might have thought of, but in a new way. Would recommend for sure. Thank you for watching. Let me know in the comments if you've read any of these or what you're reading for spring or autumn, or what you like to read. Basically, let's just have a chat because I like to know things. I'm a sticky beak, and I feel like that goes along with the spring theme because lots of baby birds with sticky beaks are being born, are being hatched, are hatching. I don't know, I don't care. You know what I mean. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more bookish content from me, and I will see you in the next one.